This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. After 7 years of unrequited love, I finally decided to give up on Tony. Returning to New York, I married someone who liked me, but on the wedding day, Tony suddenly appeared. He brought people to crash my wedding. Holding my husband at gunpoint, he threatened, "How many lives do you have to dare marry my woman?" Just after posting on WeChat Moments, I received a call from a friend. "Haley, I heard you're getting married. Is it true?" I was sorting out the guest list for the wedding and responded, "Yes, it's true." My friend laughed on the phone. Besides him, there were other voices on the line. "You're really something. How could you even deceive me? Isn't that post just meant for Tony to see?"
Yeah.
"Haley, if Tony upset you, are you really going to abandon us friends?" Hearing Tony's name again, I was stunned for a moment but quickly recovered. I explained softly, "It wasn't meant for him. I'm really getting married." Before leaving Los Angeles, I had deleted all of Tony's contact information. That WeChat moment could be seen by everyone who knew me, except him. But my friend still didn't believe it. He called out to Tony, jokingly saying, "Tony, did you hear that? If you don't make up with her, Haley will really marry someone else." I then realized this call was made in front of Tony. These rich young men always look up to Tony. Their willingness to consider me a friend was only because of Tony's face. I had always been alone in Los Angeles, with no family and no real friends. If she really plans to marry someone, I'll fly to New York to send her a gift. Tony's tone was indifferent. Even over the phone, I could imagine his lazy expression. Someone around him joked, "Isn't Haley doing this to force you to give her a title? She's liked you for so many years. Wanting a title isn't too much to ask." Tony's voice was detached. "She's just an ordinary friend. What title is there to give?" After chasing Tony for 7 years, I'm still just an ordinary friend in his eyes. Maybe it's the way the upper class plays. Kissing an ordinary friend and doing everything a couple would do with them. He was the one who tempted me to overstep. And now, he's the one who uses ordinary friend to brush me off. The chair screeched against the floor. I frowned and held the phone away. When I brought it back to my ear, I just caught Tony's parting words. "Tell her, if she doesn't come back tomorrow, she should never come back." I lowered my head, furrowed my brows, and smiled silently. His friends advised me, "Stop making trouble with Tony. Just come back soon." In the past, after countless arguments with Tony, I would always end up running to appease him. I always felt that if you love someone, you shouldn't give up easily. But after accumulating too much disappointment, there comes a moment when you suddenly feel unworthy for yourself. The noise on the other end of the phone was just to persuade me to go back and apologize to Tony. "Haley, just stop it." I forced a smile and spoke calmly. "I'm not making a fuss. This time it's true. I'm getting married. The wedding is scheduled for next Tuesday. You're welcome to attend." They still couldn't believe it. How could it be? "You've liked Tony for 7 years. How could you be willing to marry someone else?" "Yes, I've liked Tony for 7 years. So why did I finally give up?" My father saved Uncle Bame's life. So after my parents passed away, I was taken in by Tony's family. The first time I met Tony, Uncle Bame introduced me to him. "Bame is Tony's father. This is the daughter of a friend of your father. She will live with us from now on. I hope you two can become friends." Later, Tony and I indeed became very good friends. He didn't like studying, so he would throw his homework to me, his friend, to do. Before exams, he'd ask me to outline key points, predict exam questions, and cram important material. When he got into trouble outside, I'd help cover for him at home. Every time he asked me for something, Tony would put his arm around my shoulder and say, "Haley, aren't we friends? Friends should help each other, don't you think?" Since Tony's family had always supported me and Tony was Uncle Bame's only son, I could never bring myself to say no to him. Even when he got caught for early dating at school, Tony came to ask me, "Haley, she's different from you. That obedient girl will cry if the head teacher says something. You're the top student, the head teacher's favorite. Even if I say I'm dating you, the head teacher won't scold you." I pursed my lips, but my thoughts were on what I had overheard in the stairwell, his friend saying, "Tony, if you don't want your little girlfriend to get scolded, just let Haley admit she's dating you. Anyway, she likes you, so she won't refuse. But by the way, Haley is pretty." "Tony, why don't you like her?" Tony said, "Have you read too many novels? She and we are not in the same circle. Prince and Cinderella stories only exist in fairy tales." When I heard that, my first reaction was, Tony wasn't wrong. But I didn't know when he and his group of friends discovered that I liked Tony. And now, Tony, as usual, put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Haley, we're friends, right? You won't refuse me, will you?" Tony was right. I wouldn't refuse him. "Okay." When he heard my agreement, he raised his eyebrows, smiling, and pinched my cheek. I took a step back, avoiding Tony's hand, and continued, "But you must break up with her." Tony agreed without hesitation. "Sure. I didn't expect him to agree so readily. The explanation I was about to give was momentarily stuck before coming out. Uncle Bame already knows about your early dating. Breaking up now is best for both of you. Tony looked at me with a meaningful gaze. He shrugged nonchalantly and said, "You don't need to explain. Even if I break up with her, I still won't be with you." My expression instantly froze. Tony, however, smiled even more maliciously. "After all, we're friends. After all, friends." If he could really maintain a friendly distance, I might not have foolishly followed him for so many years. The nature of my relationship with Tony changed dramatically that summer after the college entrance exams. He said he was drunk and asked me to pick him up. When I arrived at their gathering place, his friends teased him. "Tony, Haley is really good to you. Why don't you just be with her?" Tony shot them a scowl. "Why would I be with a friend? That's disgusting." He claimed it was a friendship, but he was the one kissing me when I wasn't paying attention. He said, "Haley, they're right. You are really beautiful." My head was buzzing, and he was the one helping me out of the car when we got home. Tony wasn't drunk, at least, he was sober when we did those things. He asked, "Are you planning to go to university, eh?" I nodded. Tony was supposed to go abroad. Uncle Bame had arranged that long ago. But unexpectedly, he ended up enrolling at University A with me. On the way, I asked him why. Tony leaned back in his seat and turned to look at me. "Haley, you should know why I stayed." I foolishly thought he stayed for me. So I considered every movie we watched together, every meal we shared, every time alone, as a date. But when Tony talked about me, he still called us just ordinary friends. Ordinary friends? In your heart, am I just an ordinary friend? I asked him through tears. Tony said, "Isn't it better this way? Do you need to make our relationship public to be happy?" "Haley, I don't like that. I thought you understood me." In truth, I didn't understand Tony at all. But because I loved him, I would still appease him before he left, begging for reconciliation. No matter what, I always remembered how he stood up for me when I first transferred to Los Angeles, defending me from those who mocked my accent. Tony's words, "If anyone bullies you in the future, just tell me," I remembered for a lifetime. But later, the person who bullied me the most turned out to be him. Tony was surrounded by many beautiful women, all his friends. I comforted myself. After all, his friends knew about our relationship, so it didn't matter if it was public or not. Until the third year after college graduation, my grandmother suddenly fell seriously ill. Her only wish was to see me married. When I hurriedly went to find Tony, I saw him hugging Serena. I realized how foolish and absurd it was to think Tony stayed behind for me, defying Uncle Bame. Serena was Tony's high school sweetheart, a graduate from the art department at University A. She was also Tony's only acknowledged girlfriend. Tony stayed because of her. I stood a few steps away, watching them. I heard Serena say, "I remember Haley liked you back in school. You even said she was like a toad wanting to eat swan meat." She paused. "I often saw you with Haley in college. Did you two end up together?" "No." Tony denied, "We're just ordinary friends." The words, ordinary friends, suddenly woke me up. I realized this 7 years was just a joke. I once thought I could warm Tony's heart. Now I understand, a person's heart is naturally warm, but it depends on whom it's directed at. That night, I swallowed all the words I had intended to say to Tony. After deleting all his contact information, I bought a plane ticket to leave Los Angeles. New York doesn't have the dazzling, illusory glamour. Everything here is very real. After I returned, my grandmother's condition improved significantly, so she had the energy to start setting me up on blind dates. I understood her thoughts. "I'm afraid that after I'm gone, you'll really be alone. If those relatives could be relied on, they wouldn't have sent you to your dad's friend's house after your mother passed away. Grandma hopes you can settle down, find a suitable person, preferably someone who likes you and can take care of you." So when she introduced me to Zhang Grandma's grandson, I didn't refuse. Zhang Grandma's grandson, Rocky, was tall, nearly 1.9 meters. Handsome with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, he was the type not lacking girlfriends. On our first meeting, he gave me a bouquet of lily of the valley. It was novel. I expected roses for a blind date. "You don't look like someone who needs a blind date." I spoke directly. Rocky smiled and nodded. "You don't look like it either." He had a small mole under his eye, giving him a touch of depth and emotion. When I got home, I told my grandmother, "Rocky seems nice, but I feel like he has many girlfriends." "Nonsense." Grandma laughed, her eyes disappearing. She said, "I've seen Rocky grow up. Many girls like him, but he's a good kid. Besides," Grandma hesitated. "Besides what?" I asked, but she wouldn't say more. The little old lady was quite playful, always keeping people guessing. Grandma and Zhang Grandma were eager to matchmake us. Rocky played along with them, making me seem like the one who didn't appreciate it. Haley, do you want to give us a try? He asked me this while we were picking grapes in the field. It wasn't the right setting for such a question, but hearing Rocky ask, I forgot to refuse. New York's summer isn't particularly hot, but the sunlight is glaring. I stood there, thinking for a moment before confessing my history with Tony. I thought he would mind or back off. But Rocky seriously told me, life moves fast these days. It's rare to find someone who truly likes another person. Haley, you're better than I imagined. He was very good at giving compliments. Just like he'd said earlier, Haley, you're really great at picking grapes. Rocky's New York accent combined with his unique tone was very pleasant to hear. As I got to know him, I realized his superior looks were just one of his least remarkable qualities. Humor, romance, humility, filial piety, respect for women. He had more shining qualities than stars in the sky. Grandma's condition fluctuated, sometimes improving, sometimes worsening. Each time she was ill, she was very obedient and cooperated with the doctor. Until one day, I accidentally heard her ask the doctor in secret, how much longer can I live? Doctor, please save me. I can't die yet. My Haley hasn't settled down. If I die, she'll be so lonely. I gently closed the door and sat back down on the bench in the hallway. When I was about to call Rocky, I looked up and saw he had already come. Grandma said your grandmother is ill. Is it serious? He seemed out of breath, likely having rushed over. It's not serious. I forced a smile and shook my head. Rocky was very tall. I had to look up to see his eyes. Rocky. Do you want to marry me? Before asking this question, I already knew the answer. He wouldn't refuse. Rocky liked me, it was evident. But he was still surprised. Are you sure? I answered softly. Are you unwilling? Willing. A smile gradually spread across his eyes. Perhaps noticing I was constantly looking up, Rocky squatted down in front of me. Suddenly, the roles reversed. Do you know why I gave you Lily of the Valley the first time we met? The flower's meaning is, before happiness arrives, I'll wait slowly until you come back. Haley, I've liked you since the first time I saw you. The wedding was organized by Rocky. I thought, with such little time, it would be simple. But when his assistant briefed me on the schedule for the day, I realized how serious Rocky was. The wedding was romantic and grand. I hadn't planned to make it public, but I suddenly posted about getting married on social media. Unfortunately, I didn't have many friends, so no one came to the wedding. After dinner, Rocky and I went to see a movie. The film was my choice, a visually stunning but boring art piece. Such movies are not popular in small places like New York. There were only a few people in the theater, and halfway through, it was just Rocky and me. The screen showed the lead characters kissing passionately. I turned to Rocky and asked, Rocky, haven't we shared a kiss yet? My voice was soft, but Rocky surely heard. His earlobes turned bright red. In the 3 months since returning to New York, many people praised Rocky for his composure. But now, the usually composed Rocky was visibly nervous when kissed, a rare sight. I couldn't resist teasing him, pulling away just as he seemed to savor the kiss. Rocky stood there, at a loss, but he quickly realized I was teasing. Haley. It was the first time he called me that way. Rocky's voice was husky and tender, sending an electric thrill through my ears. My heart skipped a beat. Could you kiss me again? He clung to my fingers, pleading. Rocky had a captivating charm that made one fall for him. When I leaned in to kiss him again, Rocky's hand moved to my waist. I tried to pull away again, but Rocky's hand on my waist tightened, pulling me into his embrace. Haley, could we kiss a bit longer? This time, he took control. I could only brace myself against his chest, breathe slowly, and tilt my head up to accept. Haley. Rocky kissed me repeatedly, calling my name over and over. His voice grew choked with emotion. After tasting the bitterness of tears, I opened my eyes and gently pushed him away. Why are you crying? Rocky held me, burying his head in my shoulder. I'm sorry, did I scare you? I shook my head, stunned. He continued, Haley, I really like you. Everything right now feels like a dream. His sudden confession left me somewhat flustered. After a moment, I patted his back, comforting him. It's probably pre-wedding anxiety. Just relax and don't worry too much. He said, I guess I am a bit anxious. Haley, could you stay with me more during this time? I nodded in agreement. After the movie, Rocky dropped me off at the apartment. The building is an old one, mostly inhabited by elderly residents. Seeing the red sports car parked nearby, Rocky and I both looked at it curiously. As we were about to leave, Rocky suddenly asked, Haley, will you regret it? Regret what? I asked, puzzled. Rocky looked at me, his expression tense. Regret marrying me? No, I replied firmly. Rocky, marrying you wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. So, I will never regret it. The streetlights were old and flickered on and off. Rocky stood on the steps, gazing at me. His eyes were gentle, shining brightly. Yes, if one day you regret it, it will be because of my shortcomings. Haley, I won't let you regret it. He was usually reserved, but at this moment, he smiled broadly, and the small mole under his eye twinkled. When he walked away, his figure disappearing, I prepared to go home. But then I saw Tony standing in the shadows nearby. Seeing me frozen in place, Tony scoffed softly and walked towards me. I suddenly remembered his phone call where he said, if she really gets married, I'll fly to New York immediately to give her a wedding gift. Tony truly kept his word. I forced a smile, about to thank him, but Tony's face remained serious as he asked, who is that man? I didn't answer but asked him, what are you doing in New York? Tony, hands in his pockets, looked at me with dark eyes. What do you think I'm here for? He had a knack for saying these vague things. It was the same type of comment he used when I went to a university for reporting. Back then, I foolishly thought he liked me, but not anymore. Are you here to give me a wedding gift? Thank you. Tony's expression darkened. Today was the third day since he learned about Haley's wedding. On the first day, he thought it was just a temporary fuss. On the second day, still blocked by Haley, he saw her photos with that man on her social media through a friend. Tony suddenly realized that Haley might really be getting married this time. He thought, if she wants to get married, then let her. He never had much genuine affection for her. The ambiguous actions were only because Haley was beautiful and liked him, so he didn't mind the flirtation. But that night, he had a dream where Haley lay in that man's arms, reliving their past together. Tony woke up abruptly and immediately bought a plane ticket to New York. Who was that man earlier? He repeated his question, obsessively seeking an answer from me. I suddenly thought of my past self. Back then, many beautiful girls would suddenly appear around Tony, and my insecurity made me repeatedly ask about them. Tony initially answered patiently, just friends. Later, he became increasingly impatient. He said, Haley, why do you care who they are? You're so nosy. Now, Tony's tone was the same as when I asked him about those girls. But I wouldn't hide like he did, like a coward. He's my fiancé. We're engaged and we'll have a wedding soon. Tony, if you have time, you can stay in New York for our wedding. Tony sneered, threatening me with your wedding? Perhaps because my past feelings for Tony were so unreserved, passionate, and grand. Everyone thought I would never leave Tony, never give up on him, and marry someone else. I'm really getting married, whether you believe it or not. Fine. Tony took out his phone and dialed a number in front of me. If you're getting married, I'll invite my friends from Los Angeles to your wedding. Haley, I want to see if you dare to marry someone else in front of me. His voice was loud and fierce, drawing attention from the upstairs residents. Haley, I didn't know when Grandma came downstairs. She stood in front of me, warning Tony, no one bullies my Haley with me around. The little old lady genuinely saw Tony as a villain and pushed me back. Go upstairs quickly. I'll hold him here. Haley, don't be afraid. Rocky will be here soon. As soon as she finished speaking, I saw Rocky coming back. Rocky was polite and courteous, but Tony was not. Tony, raised in privilege, had developed an arrogant demeanor. He ignored Rocky's outstretched hand, looked at me, and disdainfully said, Do you think Haley really wants to marry you? She's just throwing a tantrum to force me to compromise. Despite Tony's attitude, Rocky remained calm. You don't understand Haley. She's not that kind of person. I didn't know which words angered Tony. He suddenly exploded. You think you know her better than I do? Do you know her past and dare to marry her? Rocky maintained a gentle smile and spoke calmly. If I wanted to know, I'd ask her myself. She would tell me if she wanted to. He added, I don't need to learn about Haley through others. But Tony was self-centered. She's liked me since childhood, followed me for 7 years. In those 7 years, we've done everything. He spoke boastfully and with a hint of arrogance. I bit my lip, feeling a mix of emotions. Rocky squeezed my hand, a silent comfort. I looked down as he rebutted Tony. So what? She liked you for 7 years, and I've liked her for 13. Mr. Tony, it's not her fault she liked you, nor does it stain her character. On the contrary, I admire her willingness to love someone selflessly, even if that person isn't me. Knowing she once liked you so much makes me respect her even more. She was hurt and bullied by you, and I'm heartbroken for her. So I'll love her twice as much, making up for the suffering she endured with you. To be honest, I should thank you. Without you, my hidden love might never have seen the light of day. Mr. Tony, do you have anything else to say? His words shocked both me and Tony. Tony stood stunned. Grandma picked up the broom from the wall. Don't think Haley is easy to bully. She has support. Try bullying her again and see what happens. The broom was definitely not clean. Tony retreated in disgust. Before leaving, he couldn't help but threaten, "Do you really think you can marry her?" When Rocky called, I was still by the window, enjoying the breeze. Grandma had already fallen asleep. She was shaken tonight, and after taking her medicine, it took her a while to fall asleep. Before bed, Grandma cried and said, "I'm useless, letting you suffer so much before, enduring so much injustice." Actually, I had lived quite well in Tony's house over the years. Uncle Bame treated me well, with food and supplies comparable to what Tony had. I didn't suffer much or face much injustice. I was always grateful to him. So after setting the wedding date, I sent him a separate wedding invitation immediately. Just earlier, I received his reply, "Uncle is very busy lately. He might not make it to the wedding." Uncle Bame had indeed been very busy these past 2 years. "It's okay. Take care of yourself and rest more." As soon as I sent the message, Rocky called. "I'm home. Is Grandma asleep?" "She is." I suddenly remembered what he said downstairs. So I asked him, "Was what you said to Tony earlier true?" There was a brief silence on the other end, as if he was thinking. "Haley, everything I said to him tonight was true." My heart suddenly raced. "Was the part about loving me for 13 years also true?" Rocky replied with a smile. "It's all true. So when you said you liked me at first sight, it wasn't from that blind date, right?" My voice was a bit fast. "Rocky, did we know each other before?" Standing by the window, I thought for a long time, but couldn't recall anyone like him. "I know you, but you might not know me." Rocky's voice was tinged with disappointment. "It's normal if you've forgotten. It's been so long. Haley, we need the ability to turn the page. Let the past be the past." The wind outside grew stronger, with faint low rumbles of thunder. Rocky said, "It's getting windy. It might rain." I suddenly thought about our wedding. "If it rains, can our outdoor wedding still go as planned?" He answered with certainty, "Of course." After hanging up, I still couldn't sleep. Tony's threat kept replaying in my mind. After much thought, I decided to remove Tony from the blacklist. I sent him a message to arrange a meeting. Tony's first words when he saw me were, "Come back to Los Angeles with me." I shook my head lightly. "Tony, we're over." "Why should it be over just because you say so?" Tony was unwilling to accept it. "Haley, we haven't even broken up yet, and you're getting married to someone else. What do you think I am?" Indeed, I left in a hurry and didn't explain anything. "But we've never been together." "Tony, didn't you say we were just friends? You never confessed to me or asked if we should be together." "I never agreed to be your girlfriend. How could that be considered being together? And didn't you always tell everyone we were just friends?" Tony's lips moved, but he was at a loss for words. I thought these things didn't need to be said, that we both understood. I had never received such things before, so I consoled myself. If it didn't exist, it was okay, as long as we both knew our relationship. But Rocky told me that ceremonies matter. So he confessed his feelings, asked me to give us a try, proposed, and prepared an elaborate engagement ceremony. When introducing me, he would say, "This is my fiancé." His affection was never hidden, providing me with a sense of security. "Tony, the truth is, you don't like me. You wouldn't treat someone you like this way." When he was with Serena, he was flashy and arrogant, almost wanting everyone at school to know. I continued, "Actually, that night I left Los Angeles, I saw you with Serena." Tony interrupted. "I've been done with her for a long time. You can ask her if you don't believe me." He acted so quickly that I didn't have time to stop him, and the call to Serena was already connected. Tony's phone was on speaker. "Tony, is something wrong?" "It's nothing, Serena. We've been done for a long time, right?" There was a pause in her voice. Why the sudden question? Tony looked at me and said, "Because someone misunderstood our relationship. She's right next to me." Serena laughed twice. "Is it Haley, right?" "Haley, I've been done with Tony for a long time." Tony's sudden stunt made both Serena and me awkward. I quickly explained. After ending the call, I frowned at Tony. "Tony, I don't care about your relationship with Serena anymore. Can you stop being so childish? If you don't care, then break up with Rocky and come back to Los Angeles with me." I said calmly, "I'm not going back. I don't like Los Angeles. The winters are too cold." Actually, I liked Los Angeles when I first arrived. The winter was snowy and magical, like an elfin world. Later, I began to dislike the cold winters because one year, while accompanying Tony to the western hills to see the snow, he left me on the mountain. That night, I was cold and scared, crying and running down the mountain. Fortunately, I was saved by kind people after fainting. I had never been so ill before, and Uncle Bame was terrified. Tony looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Haley, that was an accident. I didn't do it on purpose." I smiled and nodded. It's okay, it's all in the past. Tony, our past should also be left behind. Please don't disturb me anymore." With that, I left some money for the coffee and stood up. but Tony chased after me and grabbed my arm. Haley, as long as you come back to Los Angeles with me, we'll get married. You've always wanted a title, right? Will being my wife be enough? Before I could respond, Rocky opened the car door and came over. He had brought me to meet Tony today and had been waiting in the car. He brushed Tony's hand away. Mr. Tony, it's inappropriate to hold my fiancé's hand like this. Seeing Tony preparing to act aggressively, I shielded Rocky and warned him. Tony, out of respect for Uncle Bame, I haven't said anything harsh to you. You always said we were friends, and I believe friends shouldn't get involved this way. But now, I just want you to disappear from my sight immediately. I dislike you, and I never want to see you again. Tony stood stunned. He stared at me for a long time before speaking quietly. You've never spoken to me so loudly before. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Even when I did something excessive, you would only be upset by yourself. But now, you're actually scolding me for an outsider? He's not an outsider, I retorted coldly. He's my fiancé and will be my husband in the future. With that, I took Rocky's hand and left. In the car, I asked Rocky, did you come with me today because you're unsure about me? Rocky glanced at me and smiled wryly. I'm not confident in myself. My pre-wedding anxiety has been getting worse lately. I'm afraid you might suddenly change your mind and not want me. The teasing smile on my face suddenly faded. I reached over and patted Rocky's leg, comforting him. Don't worry, Rocky, I will definitely marry you. After that day, I never saw Tony again. I thought he had left Los Angeles, until he suddenly appeared at my wedding with a group of friends. In just a few days, Tony seemed like a different person. I had never seen him looking so disheveled. He seemed to have lost a lot of weight, with hollow eyes and bloodshot veins, looking frenzied. He was a far cry from how he appeared when he first came to New York. Tony and his men cornered us in the makeup room, threatening Rocky with a gun. How many lives do you have? Dare to marry my girl? I wanted to step forward, but Rocky pulled me behind him, until I heard Uncle Bame's voice outside the door. I was puzzled by his sudden presence, when the door of the makeup room was pushed open from the outside. Seeing the scene inside, Uncle Bame quickly came over and snatched the gun from Tony. He then slapped Tony's face, saying, have you gone mad? What are you causing trouble for here? He dragged Tony to Rocky and said, Mayor Rocky, it's my fault for not managing my son properly. I apologize on his behalf. Then he had his bodyguards come in and tie up Tony. I'll take him away immediately and make sure he doesn't affect the wedding. But Tony was unwilling to leave, struggling and making a scene. He even held a pair of scissors to his own neck, threatening Uncle Bame, if you let them bind me, I'll die right here. Uncle Bame only had this one son and naturally couldn't risk doing anything further. I looked at the chaotic makeup room and pursed my lips. I walked calmly to Tony's side and slapped him across the face without warning. Everyone fell silent. Tony looked at me in disbelief, taking a long time to react. Have you had enough, Tony? If you've had enough, can you leave? I looked into his eyes and spoke each word clearly. Tony, what exactly did I do wrong? Why are you treating me this way? Trying to ruin my wedding? Tony was stunned, the scissors falling to the ground. The bodyguards took the opportunity to bind him. Haley, I interrupted him, leave. Go away from New York and never appear in front of me again. Rocky came to my side, smiled at Tony, and put his arm around my shoulder. Let's go, the wedding is starting. At the wedding, the officiant asked if I was willing to marry Rocky. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Tony guarded by bodyguards, standing in a corner watching the ceremony. When I said I do, Tony suddenly broke down in tears. To avoid disturbing the other guests, the bodyguards quickly put a towel in his mouth and took him away from the wedding venue. Grandma didn't know about Tony's outburst at the wedding. Seeing me getting married, the old lady cried and laughed. I'm just so happy. It's great. My Haley won't be alone anymore. She wasn't well, and after the ceremony, she needed to go home to rest. After seeing Grandma off, on the way back, I overheard Tony's voice. Dad, can you let me talk to Haley one more time? After I talk to her, I'll go back to Los Angeles with you. Uncle Bame was exasperated. What is there to say? She's already married. Whatever you say is useless. Tony, I told you before to be with Haley, but you didn't want her. I was wrong, Dad, Tony cried. I thought she would always like me. I planned to marry her after I was done having fun. I just didn't expect her to leave and marry someone else. Enough, Uncle Bame said, patting Tony. She's happy now. Don't disturb her anymore. Besides, you've offended Rocky. He probably won't spare you in the future. Tony, you need to grow up. I smiled slightly and pretended I didn't hear. I continued walking forward. Haley, Rocky, noticing I hadn't returned, came out to find me. He glanced at Tony and came over to hold my hand. I asked him, "Did you ask Uncle Bame to come?" Rocky answered softly, "Tony is quite crazy, but he's afraid of his father, so I sent an invitation to Uncle Bame. He was quite surprised that I was marrying you." "Oh, I see." I nodded. Seeing I had stopped talking, Rocky asked, "Are you tired?" "Not tired. The weather was nice today, with clear skies and a gentle breeze." I looked up at Rocky and quietly told him, "Rocky, I think I remember what happened when we first met. It turns out you already liked me back then." Rocky stopped walking. He smiled and kissed my forehead, then my eyes. "Yes, I love Haley. I've loved Haley for a very long time." The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.